Hey there, everyone. Um, so yesterday I saw Oppenheimer in the theaters, and I thought I for the upload today I would just give my 2 cents on it. Also, I'm currently kind of in between machines at the moment, so haven't had as much time to research and edit as I would otherwise have wanted. So, Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's biopic of Robert Oppenheimer, the head of the Manhattan Project and the Los Alamos facility that formed the Trinity tests, which led to the United States of America developing nuclear arsenal during the Second World War. I guess I would kind of just get my initial thoughts out the way first, and then I'll kind of go into specifics, because overall, I did enjoy the film. There's going to be some things that I wasn't so hot on, which I'll list out here, but overall, I thought it was pretty good. I don't like giving out numerical scores because I feel that these are really easy to misconstrue. But you know what, I'll try to please the algorithm and to drive engagement. I'll give out one by the end of this. So, what to say about Oppenheimer? I mean, first things first. Like, as much as I sometimes have misgivings about Christopher Nolan, the man can direct a movie. I think that he's in danger of disappearing up his own ass at times, and that is definitely still the case here. But overall, I thought that Nolan assembled a very good team, a very good cast. Everyone is competently directed. Sometimes the film is a little lacking in subtlety, but that's just a shortcoming of Nolan's, in my opinion. And I'm still of the opinion that at least some of the time, Christopher Nolan is... I think he's a little bit overrated as a director. He's a little bit like Quentin Tarantino in that he's a good director that weirdo film nerds put up on a pedestal, when I don't think it's always necessarily earned. You're still entitled to like him. I just think that he's sometimes a teensy bit overrated, and I think people maybe start to wake up to that fact a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about this movie without talking about Cillian Murphy and his performance. I think they really couldn't have gone wrong with having him as a leading man. Everyone in this is a reasonably good has reasonably good physical likeness to the people that they're playing, without being overly concerned with makeup that would transform actors. I think the one exception to that is maybe Gary Oldman, who has a cameo at one point as the president of the United States, and he was actually a little bit distracting as a result, because I wasn't looking at him as his character, I was just looking at him as Gary Oldman in a bunch of makeup. But you know what, I am kind of here now for this kind of weird alternate universe we're picking up, where Gary Oldman has played every single head of state in the Second World War. We've had him as Churchill, we've had him as the president, as President Harry Truman. I'm looking forward to Gary Oldman playing Emperor Hirohito. That should be fun. Yes, no, there is a very talented stable of actors on this movie. There's a lot of people that you recognized from things. A couple of standout performances. Obviously, I mentioned Cillian Murphy is very good. Robert Downey Jr. is also good as Joseph Strauss. I'll kind of get into some performances a little bit later, without spoiling. There will be spoilers in this video, and I'll signpost the spoilers before I get to them. You know, actually, I am going to get into spoilers, because you know what, it was a real event. You know, in terms of plot spoilers, like if you've watched a documentary about Oppenheimer, you know what's going to happen, right? So as much as I did enjoy the film, I think maybe one of its biggest drawbacks is I don't think the film knew what it wanted to be. It has a 3-hour runtime, and by God, does it kind of feel like that towards the end. I'm now personally of the opinion that if we're going to be getting blockbuster movies that are 3 hours long, we need to bring back theater intermissions, because frankly, the human body is not designed to sit in a chair that long in one go. So please, just I don't know, make him drop the I am death, destroyer of worlds, and then cut to intermission so I can get up and go to the bathroom. That would be fun. Yeah, so in terms of the film being confused, what I mean by that is very much at the start of the film seems to want to be more of a character study of Oppenheimer. And there's elements of that throughout the film. So it's obviously it's telling the events of what happened, but it's from a very subjective point of view. We see how Oppenheimer internally reacts to things. His understanding of physics actually bleeds through into how he views the world at times, although I think that's an idea that isn't examined as thoroughly as it otherwise could have been, and is mostly just used to set up some cool visuals, which then you also have the attempt at a factual and a narrative story as well. So the narrative isn't just about the lead up to the Trinity test, it's also about the political actions taken against Oppenheimer in the wake of World War, especially the rise of McCarthyism and the fact that Oppenheimer had alienated members of the American political class in the 1940s and 1950s. So technically earlier, but that's kind of when people really started taking shots at him. And as a result, you've got a film that wants to be a very intimate character study of Robert Oppenheimer, but also wants to tell the story of his life between the 1920s and the 1950s. And by God, does it fill that 3-hour runtime trying to do both? What I will say is, if you're familiar with the broad strokes of the story, but you haven't, say, watched a documentary or something like that, this movie throws a lot of characters at you, which aren't particularly set up. And there are multiple scenes, maybe even dozens of scenes, where a world-famous physicist will show up. They'll go, "Oh, hello, Dr. So-and-so," and then they barely ever speak to that person again. And it almost seems like there was a refusal to cut the number of people from the story, which is laudable to a certain degree, because obviously for something like the Trinity tests to happen, you need a huge number of supremely talented people all working towards making a big doomsday weapon. But this was occasionally to the detriment of the understanding of what events were happening in the film. For instance, there are frequent references to what's referred to as the Chevalier incident, but when it comes time for that incident to actually happen, the film spends more time talking about it and less time actually showing the event taking place. I believe the actual events mostly take place off camera, and I was almost left having to build from context clues as to what the Chevalier incident was, because I didn't watch a documentary as required reading for watching this film. The fact that a huge number of really famous physicists showed up also meant that sometimes it was burying the lead as to which characters I needed to be paying attention to, again, because I wasn't completely 100% familiar with the events of what occurred in Oppenheimer's life. So, for instance, I would see names that I would recognize, such as Heisenberg or Bohr or Fermi, really famous scientists, but then it turns out I actually needed to be paying attention to people like Dr. Hill and Dr. Teller, which were names that I was not as familiar with. And the huge stable of actors is not just a boon to the film, and I think it is a boon. There is a lot of very talented people acting in this movie, and they all do a very good job. But it does mean that occasionally you'll get a character played by a talented and well-known actor, and they're barely in the movie. I think, for example, one example is Casey Affleck's character, who I think is in the movie for literally 1.5 scenes, and then that's it, and then he leaves. And the views that you do get of him almost set him up to be an antagonist, but then he just fucks off, because this is based on real life, and real life doesn't follow clear narrative beats the same way that fiction does. That being said, you can tell that a lot of the events in the film are fictionalized and dramatized. I'm sure, as with many other movies like this, there is a lot of condensing events, moving things around, and that sort of thing. In regards to how the movie is made, cinematography, excellent. No issues there. Very talented cinematographer worked on this. I had a couple of issues with the audio. The soundtrack was a little oppressive at times. Granted, I think the theater that I saw it in had the volume a little too loud. But the soundtrack was a little too oppressive at times, and at times where I felt that it wasn't intended to be. like in a movie, something like Dune, where the soundtrack is designed to be this like kind of wall of sound. Occasionally in this, things would just massively spike in volume. The mix, as a general rule, is better than, say, something like Tenet, in that people have conversations in Oppenheimer, and I can actually hear what they're saying and understand what they're saying. So that is an improvement. However, there still are occasions where, and I feel that this is partly down to Christopher Nolan's filmmaking style, where lines of dialogue were obscured and it was difficult to make out exactly what it was people were saying, which wouldn't be so much of an issue if, again, because this is such a dense film, hugely important events often are portrayed entirely via dialogue. So that can be a little bit of an issue at times. And I can see people who maybe struggle a little bit with non-linear film timelines. I could see them maybe struggling to keep up with exactly what was happening in the film at times. As a general rule, the film does do a pretty decent job of using various context clues to let you know where we are on the timeline. And I much rather did that than having like a little scrolling piece of text at the bottom of the screen that says like the location and the year. And I actually do think that that was sometimes intentional, was blurring space and time between various events. The film does have a relatively straightforward metaphor in regards to quantum mechanics, which I found to be quite interesting. And in doing so, it presents various events in the film, especially from Oppenheimer's perspective, where it presents how two seemingly contradictory things can both be true. One example is the death of a character that Oppenheimer is quite close to, where the event is depicted both in his mind as them taking their own lives, but also being murdered. And due to the guilt that Oppenheimer feels about that particular event, these two seemingly contradictory events can also both be true at the same time, in the same way that light can be both a particle and a wave. I would have maybe liked a little bit more of that, and I maybe would have liked a little bit more of Oppenheimer's understanding of the world through the frame of physics to influence his perception of things. But I'm going to be honest, the film is already dense enough without that. Some people are criticizing the film for being overly political. If you know anything about the events, if you know anything about the people involved, you can't tell the story without being political. And often when people say that, what they actually mean is it's actually just portraying politics that they don't like, to which case I say suck it up. So yeah, all in all, very good. It was very overly dense. If you struggle to keep up with the film, I don't think that's on you. It is quite a difficult film to follow at times. I think it tries to do a bit too much. There are some unintentionally funny moments. For example, when Oppenheimer, at one point he tries out wearing an army uniform, and one of his friends is like, "No, you should just wear what makes you you." And as he's suiting up like fucking Iron, like fucking Captain America. And he has like his hat and his pipe on the table in front of him, and it zooms in like it's zooming in on fucking Captain America's shield, as if like, oh, that's the iconic Oppen hat, you know, which was a little silly. It almost felt like a parody at that point. You know, we need our intrepid hero to step up and make a nuclear weapon that's going to kill hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Oh boy, I can't wait. And we also had, at one point, there was it wasn't quite a jump scare, but an Einstein jump scare, where at one point Albert Einstein lumbers out of the darkness like fucking Jason Voorhees towards Oppenheimer, just seemingly out of nowhere. But because we're not watching a Friday the 13th movie, he has like a physics textbook or something rather than machete. But yeah, it was just the fact that in this movie we just have a surprise Einstein appearance, which again I thought was genuinely really quite funny. All in all, very enjoyable, unintentionally funny at times, a little absurd, but not necessarily in a bad way. The audio mix was mostly okay, but a little too chaotic at times. And yeah, I feel I feel maybe you could have cut 20 minutes out of this. Maybe just cut some of the fat off the script. Maybe have a maybe have a few less like characters involved. I don't know. I'm loath to say to cut the number of characters in the film because everyone that did show up was kind of fun in their own way. Yeah, it's a tough one. If I was to give it a numerical score, I would say this movie was a solid. It was pretty good. It was good. I would say a 7 or an 8 out of 10 from me. I really did enjoy it. It's going to be one of the better movies of the year. A reminder that a 7 is not a bad score. 5 is middle, so 7 is pretty good. Is it worth your time? I think so. Especially if you have, if you want to see a big movie. But that's just my thoughts on the movie. What did you think? Did you like it? Do you disagree with what I said? Please let me know, and I'll see you on whenever I get the next one out. Basically, I'm recording this on my old computer, so I guess I'm going to keep making videos until this thing completely dies. I do have a replacement on the way, but I have no idea when that's going to arrive. So, yeah, I will see you on the next one. Thank you very much.